The press event began with former US President Donald Trump revisiting one of his strongest claims, that under his leadership, the war in Ukraine would never have broken out. Speaking with his familiar tone of conviction, Trump declared, "Never would have happened. If I were president, that war never would have happened ever. That's a disgrace that that war happened." And they're losing anywhere from 5,000 to 8,000 people a week on that war, which is the worst since the Second World War. That's a war that should have never happened. Trump emphasized that his presidency kept the situation under control. He reminded the audience, and if you consider, would have never happened, and it didn't happen for 4 years. When I was here, it didn't happen. In his view, the conflict erupted only because of weak leadership under the Biden administration, which, he argued, emboldened adversaries. The conversation quickly shifted to questions about US funding for Ukraine and whether a Trump administration would continue honoring financial commitments. Trump's response was sharp. Well, we're not spending any money on the war. You know, we're being paid for everything we said. Unlike Biden, he gave him $350 billion, and it was shocking. According to Trump, NATO has carried the financial burden, not Washington. He continued, we're not spending any money on the war. The war is being funded by NATO. NATO is buying our equipment. In fact, I don't want to make money on that war. I don't want to, but we are actually making money on that war because they're buying our equipment, as you know. For Trump, NATO's role is crucial. NATO, as you know, very important, is funding the entire thing. They're paying for the missiles, for the tanks. They're paying for anything they sent over there. It goes to NATO, and then NATO does what they want with it. In this case, I guess they give it to Ukraine. It's a very sad war. It's a war that never should have happened. The message was clear. Trump positioned himself as someone who both prevented global conflict and ensured America profited rather than paid for foreign wars. Attention then turned to TikTok, the Chinese-owned platform at the heart of political controversy. A journalist pressed Trump, would the US government gain a board seat as part of the deal? Trump did not give a direct answer, but hinted at upcoming announcements. Well, we're going to announce that. Are you talking about TikTok? Yeah, we're going to announce it, but it's a great deal for our country. It's a great deal for all of the young people in the country that wanted it. People generally. I was happy with it. Trump admitted his early skepticism, but explained how his view changed. Look, I wasn't a fan of TikTok, and then I got to use it, and I became a fan, and it helped me win the election in a landslide. So I think that it's a deal that's going to be great, and it's also controlled by very powerful and very substantial American people. All America, by the way, all American people. His remarks underscored the dual narrative he often embraces. Once critical of TikTok, he now touts it as a tool that expanded his outreach to millions of young voters, while also insisting that American ownership guarantees national security. Another question focused on US employment, specifically the millions of men of working age not actively seeking jobs. Trump linked his economic strategy directly to tariffs and domestic growth. He declared, well, what we're doing is they're building plants all over the United States. And frankly, because of tariffs, we're taking in trillions of dollars. Trillions of dollars. He sharply criticized nations that he argued had exploited the US for decades. Countries that have ripped us off for years, like nobody's ever been ripped off before. They're now having to pay up. They're paying a lot of money to America. And we're reducing taxes with that money. We're doing things that we were never able to do before. In Trump's telling, tariffs became not a burden, but a treasure chest for the US economy. You're going to have a lot of jobs. The jobs are being created right now, and the tariffs are protecting our country. We didn't use tariffs before. They were used against us, but we didn't use them against others. But we're really better at it than anybody else, and we will have taken in trillions of dollars. He stressed that his strategy was working without inflationary consequences. Nobody has ever seen anything. Even people that were against the tariffs, now they see the way they're working. And by the way, with no inflation, with no problem. We're just building up cash, and we're using that cash to reduce taxes, reduce debt, and other things. It's a great thing to watch. Trump concluded that under his leadership, the US economy had revived. Our country is becoming very rich again only because of tariffs. If we didn't have it, if I didn't get elected, this country it was a dead country. Look, we were a dead country a year ago, and now we're the most successful, most vibrant country anywhere in the world. Attention then shifted to financial leadership. A reporter mentioned Steve Bannon's suggestion that Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent should serve as both Treasury Chief and interim Federal Reserve Chair. Trump chuckled at the idea, but didn't entirely dismiss it. In other words, he likes Scott. Yes, sir, very much, so do I. And I like Steve too. When asked whether he would actually pursue the dual role, Trump gave a characteristically offbeat answer. I'm certainly interested in dual. We could save a little bit of salary. I think I could maybe make a deal where we just give him one salary. You know, I have a couple of them, but ultimately he clarified it was unlikely. No, I don't think that's going to be necessary. I've talked to him about that position and he loves what he's doing right now. So, you know, he's not in the mix because he loves being Secretary of the Treasury. This exchange reflected Trump's informal style, mixing humour with serious policy speculation, but ultimately signalling stability in his cabinet choices. Finally, the conversation turned to US politics at home. Reporters pointed out that early voting had begun in Virginia and asked whether Trump planned to campaign for Republican candidates such as Winsome Sears, John Reed, or Jason Miyares. Trump left his options open. Well, I'm going to have to look at some of them. As you know, it's sort of a semi-local election, and I've been watching it, though non-committal. His remarks suggested he was monitoring state races closely while prioritizing national battles. Throughout the press exchange, Trump returned to several recurring themes that define his political identity. On foreign policy, he painted himself as the leader who prevented war. His stark reminder that Ukraine lost thousands weekly and that this scale of death had not been seen since World War II was framed as evidence of Biden's failure and his own success. On TikTok, Trump recast himself as pragmatic. Initially skeptical, he claimed he embraced the app because it delivered electoral power and could be restructured under American control. On the economy, his focus on tariffs highlighted his America First trade policies, which he insisted created wealth and jobs without inflation. He portrayed himself as turning a dead country into a vibrant powerhouse. On governance, he dismissed speculation about radical changes at the Treasury or Fed, but used humour to reinforce loyalty to his team. On domestic politics, he hinted at selective involvement, signalling his awareness of local dynamics while keeping his attention on the broader national stage. The event left listeners with a familiar image of Donald Trump, combative, confident, and unfiltered. His words, delivered with certainty, painted stark contrasts between his presidency and the current administration. His claim that never would have happened. If I were president, that war never would have happened ever, resonated as the core message of the appearance, a reminder of his enduring pitch that only he could shield America from chaos abroad and decline at home. For supporters, it was vintage Trump, bold, unapologetic, and focused on strength. And for critics, it was a return to old grievances wrapped in sweeping claims. Yet either way, the performance underscored how central his voice remains in shaping debates over war, economy, technology, and the future of American leadership.